In 1921, a burger stand in Wichita sold a hamburger for 5 cents and started a revolution. 40 years later, that revolution had a name, the chain, and it was quietly erasing how America actually ate. Number 72 on this list vanished so completely, most people in its own state have never tasted it. Number 3 was invented to feed men with no money and named for them. These 100 meals fed real cities before sameness won. Hit subscribe and let us count them down. Number 100, Providence, Rhode Island, hot wieners. Nobody in Providence calls them hot dogs. They call them New York system wieners, even though they were never from New York. And if you order 3, the counterman lines them up along his bare forearm and dresses everyone in a single sweep. A small veal and pork wiener went into a steamed bun, then got a spoonful of spiced meat sauce, a line of yellow mustard, chopped raw onion, and a dusting of celery salt. Greek immigrants opened these lunch counters in the 1920s, working the overnight shift for the mill workers coming off the line at 2 in the morning. A wiener cost a dime. You ate them by the fistful, standing up, elbow to elbow with strangers. The meat sauce recipe was a guarded secret. Cinnamon and allspice ground fine, so you tasted it but could never name it. When the mills closed and the chains moved in with their bright plastic booths, the wiener joints started going dark one by one. A few holdouts remain, but the all-night counter where a man could get fed for 30 cents is nearly gone. Number 99, Fall River, Massachusetts, chow mein sandwich. This is the one people refuse to believe is real. In the Chinese-American restaurants of Fall River and New Bedford, cooks took a hamburger bun, split it open, and piled it with crunchy fried chow mein noodles, drowned in a thick brown gravy full of celery, onion, and bean sprouts. You ate a sandwich that was mostly noodles with a fork because there was no other way. It appeared in the 1920s when Cantonese immigrants adapted their cooking to the tastes and budgets of Portuguese mill families, and it cost about 15 cents, hot and filling on a cold morning. The gravy was the whole thing, dark and glossy and slightly sweet, thickened until it held the noodles together like mortar. For 3 generations, it was the taste of a Saturday downtown. Then the mill economy collapsed, the old family restaurants closed, and the sandwich survived in only a handful of counters where the owners are in their 70s. Order 1 and the cook will look at you a beat too long, surprised anyone still remembers. Number 98, Portland, Maine, the red snapper hot dog. Not a fish. In Maine, the natural casing frankfurter was dyed bright, unnatural red, and when it hit the flat-top griddle, the skin snapped so loud you could hear it across the diner. It came split and grilled, laid into a New England top-loaded bun, the kind with the flat sides that toast in butter, and topped with yellow mustard and sweet relish that was almost neon green. A snapper cost $0.25 at the lunch counters and lobster shacks up and down the coast in the 1950s. The red dye did nothing for the flavor. It was pure theater, a signal to a hungry kid that this was a treat, not just food. Local butchers made them fresh, and every town had its favorite. When the national brands took over the meat case and the coastal diners turned into franchise seafood barns, the bright red dogs faded to the ordinary brown of everywhere else. A few Maine holdouts still griddle them, and the snap still stops conversation. Number 97, Boston, Massachusetts, Indian pudding. Before dessert meant a chain restaurant's laminated menu of cheesecake photographs, Boston ended its meals with a bowl of Indian pudding, warm and dark and older than the country itself. Cornmeal was simmered slowly into scalded milk, then sweetened with molasses and spiced with ginger and cinnamon, and the whole thing baked low for hours until it set into something between a custard and a porridge. The name came from cornmeal, which colonists called Indian meal. Served warm with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting into the top, it was the Sunday supper finale at old Boston taverns and hotel dining rooms for 200 years. It cost pennies to make because molasses and cornmeal were the cheapest things in the pantry, which is exactly why the wealthy eventually abandoned it and the poor kept it alive. The long baking time is what killed it. No chain kitchen would tie up an oven for 4 hours to sell a bowl of brown pudding, so they didn't. And a genuinely ancient American dessert quietly left the menu. Number 96, Meriden, Connecticut, the steamed cheeseburger. In central Connecticut and almost nowhere else on earth, the hamburger is not grilled or fried. It is steamed. Cooks built special steel cabinets with little trays, slid a ball of ground beef into one slot and a hunk of extra sharp cheddar into another, and let the steam do the work. The beef came out gray and impossibly juicy. The cheese melted into a molten pool you spooned over the top, and the whole thing went onto a hard roll with mustard. It sounds wrong. It tastes extraordinary. The steamed cheeseburger dates to the 1920s and was a fixture of the lunch places serving the silver and hardware factories of Meriden. A steamer cost 30 cents and never dried out because steam cannot burn what it cooks. When the factories left and the flame-grilled chains planted their signs on every corner, selling the idea that a burger must be charred, the steam cabinets started disappearing. A stubborn few counters still run them, guarded like heirlooms, but most Americans have no idea their burger could ever have been this tender. Number 95, Buffalo, New York, beef on weck. Everyone knows Buffalo for the wings. Almost nobody outside Western New York knows beef on weck, which the city loved first and longest. Slow-roasted top round was sliced paper-thin, piled high, and the cut face of the bun was dunked, actually dunked, into the beef's own dripping juices until it went soft and savory. The bun was the secret. A kummelweck, a Kaiser roll crusted with coarse salt and caraway seeds that bit back against the rich beef. You added a swipe of fierce horseradish and nothing else. It came out of the German taverns and beer halls of Buffalo in the late 1800s, where the salt on the roll was a not-so-subtle trick to sell more beer. A sandwich ran about 40 cents in the 1950s. Beef on weck never traveled the way wings did, never got a franchise, never went national, and so it stayed exactly what it was, a local secret that the chains could not package. Which means to eat a real one, you still have to go to Buffalo. Number 94, Rochester, New York, the garbage plate. It has the least appetizing name in American food and one of the most devoted followings. A garbage plate started with a base, home fries, and macaroni salad side by side, then got topped with 2 cheeseburger patties or 2 hot dogs, then a ladle of spiced meat, hot sauce, mustard, and raw onion. All of it piled into a glorious mess you ate with a plastic fork at 2 in the morning. It was invented at a Rochester diner in the 1920s and perfected as college and bar food, a plate engineered to feed a hungry, half-drunk crowd for a couple of dollars. The genius was the base. The cold macaroni salad and the hot fries created a temperature and texture collision underneath everything else. Every diner in Rochester made a version, calling it a trash plate or a dumpster plate to sidestep the trademark. The chains could never touch it because it was too strange, too regional, too tied to one city's late-night rhythm. Outside Rochester, it barely exists. Number 93, Syracuse, New York, salt potatoes. This is a dish so simple it is almost a dare. Small, unpeeled, new potatoes were boiled in water so heavily salted it was nearly brine. A full cup of salt to a few pounds of potatoes, until the skins cracked and a chalky white crust formed on the outside while the inside turned creamy. Then they were drenched in melted butter. That was the entire recipe. Salt potatoes came from the salt springs of Syracuse in the 1800s, where Irish salt workers boiled their lunch potatoes right in the salt vats. For a nickel, a bag of them fed a whole family at the church picnics and county fairs of central New York. The intense salt seasoned the potato from the inside out in a way you cannot fake with a shaker at the table. They still show up at Syracuse cookouts in summer, but the idea of a restaurant building a meal around a bag of boiled potatoes vanished the moment food had to photograph well and sell at a markup. Salt potatoes were too honest to survive the age of the franchise. Number 92. Utica, New York. Chicken riggies. Deep in the Italian-American neighborhoods of Utica, a plate of chicken riggies was a Friday night institution long before anyone thought to franchise Italian food. Rigatoni, the riggies, was tossed with chunks of chicken, sweet and hot cherry peppers, and a sauce that split the difference between red and creamy. Tomato brightened with a swirl of heavy cream. The heat was the point. A real Utica cook made it hot enough to make you reach for your water and keep eating anyway. It was born in the restaurant kitchens of Utica in the mid-1900s, cooks improvising with the peppers and pasta they had, and it never appeared on a menu more than 100 miles away. A plate cost $1 and change and fed you twice. Riggies belonged to a tight-knit food culture that the chain simply could not import because it lived in family recipes and neighborhood joints, not in a corporate test kitchen. Outside the Mohawk Valley, ask for chicken riggies and you will get a blank stare. Number 91. Binghamton, New York. The Speedy. In the 1930s, Italian immigrants in Binghamton took cubes of lamb, marinated them for days in a sharp bath of oil, vinegar, garlic, and mint, then skewered and grilled them over open flame until the edges charred. The cooked meat was pulled off the skewer using a slice of plain Italian bread as a mitt, and that grease-soaked slice of bread, folded around the meat, became the sandwich. No cheese, no sauce, nothing to distract from the marinade. A spide eye cost about $1 at the taverns and roadside stands of the southern tier, and every family guarded its marinade recipe like a birthright. The word likely came from spedo, Italian for spit or skewer. For decades, the Spidey was the taste of a Binghamton summer, sold at every parish festival and Little League field. It stayed fiercely local because the whole thing depended on that days-long marinade and fresh grilled lamb, neither of which a drive-thru could ever deliver. Beyond Binghamton, the Spidey is a rumor. Number 90. New York, New York. The EGG Cream. It contains no egg and no cream, which is the first thing every New Yorker will tell you. A proper egg cream was cold whole milk, a hard shot of seltzer sprayed from the fountain tap, and a good pour of chocolate syrup. Fox's You Bet, specifically because Brooklyn insisted, stirred fast so the seltzer whipped the milk into a thick white foam collar on top. That foam was the whole art of it. Every candy store and soda fountain in New York had a spinning stool and a marble counter, and a soda jerk who could make one in 10 seconds flat. It cost a nickel through the first half of the century and was the drink of an entire immigrant city, the small, daily luxury a working family could actually afford. When the corner candy stores gave way to chain pharmacies with no fountain and no jerk, the egg cream lost the only place it had ever lived. You cannot buy one at a drive-thru. You need a marble counter and someone who knows the wrist motion, and both are nearly gone. Number 89. New York, New York. The Oyster Pan Roast. Down in the tiled cellar of Grand Central Terminal, at a counter that has served rushing commuters since 1913, cooks made a dish that was pure New York theater. Oysters were poached in their own liquor in a spinning, steam-jacketed kettle with butter, cream, chili sauce, and a splash of Worcestershire, cooked hot and fast, then poured steaming over a piece of toast set in a wide bowl. It came out pink and rich and just spicy enough, the oysters plump and barely set. A pan roast was the lunch of stockbrokers and railroad men, eaten fast at the counter for $1 or $2 while the trains rumbled overhead. The spinning steam kettle was a piece of vanishing technology, and the dish depended entirely on a cook who knew exactly when to pull the oysters before they toughened. Grand Central still keeps the tradition alive at that one counter, but the oyster bars and pan roast counters that once dotted the whole city, where fresh oysters were cheap street food, not a delicacy, are gone. Number 88, Manhattan, New York. Manhattan clam chowder. Here is the chowder that started a war. While New England guarded its cream and potato chowder like a religion, the Portuguese and Italian immigrant cooks of Manhattan and the Jersey Shore built theirs on tomatoes instead. A clear, briny, red broth loaded with clams, celery, carrots, and potatoes, with not a drop of cream in sight. New Englanders were so offended that a Maine legislator once tried to make tomatoes in chowder illegal. But the red version was cheaper, brighter, and lighter, and it ruled the lunch counters and seafood houses of downtown New York through the early 1900s, where a bowl cost 15 cents and came with oyster crackers. It was the working immigrant's chowder, made with the vegetables of a truck garden instead of expensive dairy. When the seafood counters closed and canned chowder took over the shelves, the fresh red version faded. And today, most Americans have only tasted it from a can. The rivalry outlived the dish itself. Number 87, Trenton, New Jersey. Tomato pie. This is not what the rest of the country calls a pizza, and Trenton will fight you about it. On a tomato pie, the order is reversed. The cheese goes down first, directly on the thin crust, then the toppings, and only then a layer of crushed uncooked tomatoes ladled on top in thick stripes. Because the tomatoes sit on top, they roast and blister and stay bright and acidic instead of melting into the cheese. It came from the Italian bakeries of Trenton's Chambersburg neighborhood in the early 1900s, sold by the tray to feed pottery and rubber factory workers, and a whole pie cost about $1. The point of the tomato pie was the tomato, sweet, tart, barely cooked, the star of the show, rather than a base for a pound of toppings. As the national pizza chain standardized what a pizza was supposed to look like, the tomato on-top version got branded as backwards or wrong. A handful of century-old Trenton bakeries still make it the right way. Cheese down, tomato up. Number 86, Trenton, New Jersey. Pork roll, Taylor ham. Depending on which end of New Jersey raised you, it is either pork roll or Taylor ham, and people have nearly come to blows over the name. It is a cured, smoked pork product, sliced thick, and the trick every diner cook knew was to cut small notches around the edge of each slice before frying, so it wouldn't dome up in the pan. Griddled until the edges crisped and curled, it went onto a hard roll with a fried egg and a slice of American cheese. The classic pork roll, egg, and cheese that fueled New Jersey mornings for a century. It was invented in Trenton in 1856 and sold for pennies a slice, the cheap protein that got a factory shift started. Every Jersey diner made it, and the diner itself, the chrome and vinyl all-night, order anything Jersey diner, was the real casualty as the breakfast chains rolled in. The sandwich survives at home and at the last independent diners, but the world it belonged to is closing one location at a time. First pattern break. Here is where the pattern starts to reveal itself. Look back at the first 14 meals and notice what they have in common. Almost every one of them came from immigrants. Greek, Cantonese, Italian, German, Portuguese, cooking for factory workers. And almost every one of them was too cheap, too strange, or too local to be worth a corporation's attention. That was their protection and their doom. As long as America ate in neighborhood counters and family diners, these dishes thrived, because they were the whole point of eating out. You went somewhere that made one thing better than anywhere else. The chain reversed that idea completely. The promise of a chain was that the food would be exactly the same in Trenton as in Tucson, that there would be no surprises, no local secret, no cook with a guarded marinade. Sameness was the product. And when sameness won, the first things to die were the meals that could only exist in one place. Keep that in mind as we count down, because nearly every dish on this list was killed by the same thing. Not because people stopped loving it, but because nobody could sell it in 50 states at once. Number 85, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, pepper pot soup. They called it the soup that won the revolution. Legend says a cook at Valley Forge threw together whatever the starving army had: tripe, scraps, peppercorns, and warmed the troops enough to fight on. Whether or not that is true, pepper pot became Philadelphia's signature soup for 2 centuries. A thick, peppery stew of honeycomb tripe, root vegetables, and sometimes a handful of dumplings, simmered for hours and seasoned aggressively with black pepper. It was sold from carts and stalls by black women vendors in the streets of old Philadelphia, ladled hot for a few cents, and it fed the working poor of the colonial city. The tripe is what doomed it. As American tastes turned squeamish about organ meats in the 20th century, and as chain kitchens built their menus around the 8 or 9 ingredients customers already recognized, pepper pot quietly vanished from Philadelphia menus. A dish that literally has a claim to helping found the nation is now something almost no living American has tasted. Number 84, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, snapper soup. Still, no snapper fish involved. The snapper here is snapping turtle. Philadelphia went crazy for snapper soup, a dark, thick, sherry-laced soup made from snapping turtle meat, hard-boiled egg, and a deeply browned roux, served in the city's oldest taverns and gentlemen's clubs. You finished it at the table with a pour of dry sherry stirred in, and the flavor was rich, gamey, almost beefy. Turtle was abundant and cheap in the tidewater rivers, so the soup started as common food before it climbed its way onto the fanciest menus in the city. Through the 1800s and well into the 1900s, snapper soup defined Philadelphia dining. Then turtle populations crashed. Harvesting them became restricted, and the labor of butchering and simmering turtle for hours made no sense to a chain kitchen counting minutes and pennies. A century-old Philadelphia soup house or two still ladles it out, but for most of the city, snapper soup is a name on an old menu and nothing more. Number 83, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, scrapple at the counter. Everyone thinks of scrapple as a home food, but for a century it was the anchor of the Philadelphia and Pennsylvania Dutch breakfast counter. Cooks took the trimmings of the hog, the bits too humble to sell, simmered them with cornmeal and buckwheat and sage into a loaf, chilled it firm, then sliced it a 1/4 inch thick, and fried it hard on a griddle until the outside went deep mahogany and crackling while the inside stayed soft. It went on the plate next to fried eggs, dressed with ketchup or apple butter or a drizzle of syrup for about a dime. Scrapple was the definition of wasting nothing, the whole philosophy of an immigrant farm culture compressed onto a breakfast plate. It survived because it was cheap and it fried up fast, but the diner counters that served it kept closing, and the breakfast chains that replaced them wanted nothing to do with a gray pork loaf on the menu board. A few Philadelphia spots still griddle it. Most Americans wince at the word. Number 82, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, chipped ham. In Pittsburgh, a small dairy chain called Isali's Slicing Machine could shave chipped chopped ham so thin it was almost translucent, and that gossamer ham became the city's own sandwich meat. Piled up ragged and loose, never in flat-stacked slices, it went on to white bread, and the classic move was the chipped ham barbecue. The shaved ham simmered in a sweet, tangy sauce until it fell apart, then heaped onto a bun for lunch. It cost a 1/4 and fed the steelworkers and their families through the middle of the century. The magic was entirely in the slicing. That particular wispy texture couldn't be reproduced with a knife or a home slicer, which is why it belonged to Pittsburgh and Isali's alone. When Isali's contracted and finally faded, and the national deli brands took over the meat case with their thick, uniform slices, the barely there chipped ham vanished with the counters that shaved it. Older Pittsburghers still crave it. Younger ones have never held a sandwich that light. Number 81, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, city chicken. There is no chicken in it. City chicken was a Depression-era invention from the mill towns of western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio, where actual chicken was expensive and pork and veal scraps were cheap. Cooks cubed the pork and veal, pushed the cubes onto a wooden skewer to mimic a drumstick, breaded it, browned it, then baked it low until tender. Dressed up with a stick, It let a poor family serve something that looked like a fancier bird than they could afford. Diners and boarding house kitchens all through Steel Country made it, and a skewer or two with mashed potatoes cost almost nothing. City chicken is a perfect little monument to making do, food designed to look like something better than itself. It faded for the happiest possible reason. Once real chicken got cheap in the age of industrial poultry. Nobody needed the imitation anymore. But the dish itself, the clever mimicry that got families through hard years, disappeared from restaurant menus entirely. Ask for city chicken today, and almost no cook under 60 will know what you mean. Number 80, Baltimore, Maryland, Coddies. Long before Baltimore was known for its lump crab cakes, the poor of the city ate Coddies. Cheap little codfish cakes sold 2 for a nickel off the counters of corner drugstores and candy shops. Salt cod was soaked, flaked, and mashed with mashed potato and a bit of seasoning, formed into flat patties and fried up in advance so they sat at room temperature by the register. You ate one the Baltimore way, pressed between 2 saltine crackers with a swipe of yellow mustard. That was the whole thing, a snack a school kid could buy with pocket change on the way home. Coddies were immigrant food, tenement food, the cheapest possible way to put a little protein in a sandwich. And they were everywhere in Baltimore through the 1950s. Then the neighborhood drugstore soda fountains closed, the chain pharmacies took over with no kitchen at all, and the Coddie lost its home behind the counter. The crab cake got famous. Its poor cousin, the Coddie, quietly disappeared. Number 79, Baltimore, Maryland, Lake Trout. There is no lake, and there is no trout. In Baltimore, lake trout is Atlantic whiting, battered and fried whole and served on white bread with hot sauce and a squeeze of lemon at the city's black-owned carry-out counters. The name was pure marketing from decades ago, and it stuck. The fish came out crisp and greasy and enormous, hanging off both ends of the 2 slices of bread that were never meant to contain it, and it cost a couple of dollars. An entire filling lunch for spare change. For generations of Baltimoreans, lake trout on a Friday was ritual. The carry-out counters that made it were the beating heart of their neighborhoods. Family-run, cash-only, the fryer going all day. As those independent counters got squeezed out by chain fast food and the neighborhoods around them hollowed, the lake trout carry-out became an endangered species. A handful survive, still frying whiting the size of your forearm, but the world that name came from is nearly gone. Number 78, Washington, D.C., the half smoke. Washington had its own hot dog, and almost nobody outside the city knew it. A half smoke was a fat, coarse-ground, half-pork, half-beef sausage, smokier and spicier than a normal Frankfurter, split and grilled and served on a steamed bun under a ladle of thick chili, mustard, and onions. It fed the working city, government messengers, construction crews, and night shift nurses from lunch counters and street carts through the middle of the century. And it cost less than $1. The half-smoke was denser and had more snap and more heat than a hot dog, which is exactly why the people who grew up on it never accepted a plain dog as a substitute. It became so tied to one legendary U Street chili counter that most people forgot it had ever been a citywide staple, sold everywhere. As chains blanketed the corners that carts and counters once held, the half-smoke shrank to a couple of institutions. It is one of the few dishes on this list holding its ground, but only barely, and only in D.C. Number 77, Charleston, South Carolina, she crab soup. In Old Charleston, the finest thing on a restaurant menu was a bowl of she crab soup, a velvety cream soup made from blue crab meat, and the detail that gave it the name, the bright orange roe of the female crab, which turned the soup a pale coral and gave it a deep briny richness. A pour of dry sherry went in at the table. Local lore credits a butler cooking for a visiting president in the early 1900s with refining it. But Charleston's cooks, many of them black women whose skill built the city's whole culinary reputation, had been making crab soups like it for generations. It was the taste of low-country abundance when the tidal creeks gave up more crab than anyone could sell. As crab got expensive and regulations protected the roe-bearing females, true she-crab soup with the actual roe became nearly impossible to serve. Most versions today fake the color with other ingredients. The real thing, coral and sherried and impossibly rich, is a Charleston memory, more than a Charleston meal now. Number 76, Charleston, South Carolina. Hoppin' John at the table. Everyone knows Hoppin' John is a home dish for New Year's luck, but in Charleston it was a proper restaurant plate. And the restaurant version was something more refined than the pot at home. Carolina Gold Rice, the legendary long-grain rice that once made the Lowcountry rich, was cooked with field peas or cowpeas, seasoned with a smoked ham hock, and served, so each grain stayed distinct, and the whole thing tasted of the rice itself, nutty and delicate. Charleston's cooks understood that Hoppin' John lived or died on the rice, and Carolina Gold was the finest rice in the world. A plate cost little because peas and rice were cheap, but the quality of the rice made it aristocratic. Then Carolina Gold rice went commercially extinct for most of the 20th century, wiped out by hurricanes and the end of enslaved labor that had built the plantations, and the dish lost its sole ingredient. Cheap, uniform white rice replaced it. The peas and rice plate survived. The Carolina Gold that made it extraordinary vanished for generations. Number 75, Savannah, Georgia. Country Captain. This is a curry that traveled from the ports of India to the port of Savannah and became, for a while, one of the most fashionable dishes in America. Chicken was browned and stewed in a sauce of tomato, onion, and curry powder, studded with currants and scattered with toasted almonds, and served over rice. Sea captains trading in spices supposedly carried it into the Georgia and South Carolina ports in the 1800s, and the coastal South adopted it as its own. For decades, Country Captain was elegant restaurant and hotel food, exotic enough to impress but comforting enough to love, and it even became a favorite of presidents and generals passing through. It cost little more than a chicken and a spoonful of curry powder, but it carried a whiff of the wider world into a southern dining room. As American restaurant menus narrowed toward the safe and the familiar in the chain era, a curried chicken with currants and almonds was exactly the kind of odd, wonderful regional specialty that got dropped. Country Captain is now almost forgotten outside a few old Savannah kitchens. Number 74, Nashville, Tennessee. The Meat and Three. Before Nashville was famous for hot chicken, its true soul food was the Meat and Three. Not a single dish, but an entire way of eating lunch that the chains all but exterminated. You walked a cafeteria line, chose one meat from the day's roster: fried chicken, meatloaf, country fried steak, pork chop, and 3 vegetables from a long steam table of southern sides: turnip greens, mac and cheese, fried okra, stewed apples, black-eyed peas, candied yams. It came with cornbread or a biscuit, and the whole plate cost a couple of dollars. The Meat and Three was the daily democratic lunch of the working South, where a banker and a bricklayer ate the same plate at the same counter. Its enemy was the fast food value meal, which offered speed and a drive-through window against the slow, sit-down ritual of a real hot lunch. One by one, the Meat and Threes closed as the lunch crowd went to the chains. A cherished handful survive in Nashville, still ladling greens, but the form is endangered across the whole region it once defined. Number 73, Louisville, Kentucky. The Hot Brown. In 1926, a chef at Louisville's Brown Hotel needed something to feed the late-night dinner dance crowd, and he built an open-faced masterpiece. Toast went down first, then slices of roast turkey. Then the whole thing was blanketed in a rich Mornay cheese sauce, topped with crisp bacon and tomato, and run under the broiler until the sauce bubbled and browned. It came to the table molten, the sauce browning at the edges of the dish, hot enough to burn your mouth if you didn't wait. The hot brown was hotel food, glamorous and heavy and perfect at midnight, and it became Louisville's signature dish. It survived better than most on this list precisely because that one hotel kept making it. But the version that mattered, the open-faced, broiler-blistered, made-to-order hot brown of a real hotel kitchen, is a world away from anything a chain would attempt. It required a broiler, a cook, and a few minutes per plate. 3 things. Fast food eliminated on purpose. Outside Louisville, the dish barely registers. Number 72. Louisville, Kentucky. The rolled oyster. Here is a lost Louisville treasure almost nobody remembers. A rolled oyster was 3 fresh oysters bound together in a thick cornmeal and cracker batter, rolled into a ball the size of a baseball, and deep fried until the crust went golden and shattering while the oysters steamed inside. It was invented in Louisville's Bardstown Road oyster houses in the 1800s, sold cheap as bar food and street food, a way to make a few oysters into a substantial, handheld meal for a nickel or a dime. The crust-to-oyster ratio was the whole idea, mostly crunch, with a briny surprise in the center. Louisville loved rolled oysters when the Ohio River trade brought barrels of cheap oysters upriver, and every tavern had them. When the oyster trade dried up and the old fried fish houses closed, the rolled oyster went with them. A single legendary Louisville institution kept making them, but the dish that was once as common as popcorn in that city is now a genuine rarity that most Kentuckians have never even heard of. Number 71. Lexington, Kentucky. Burgoo. Burgoo is Kentucky's great communal stew, cooked in cast-iron kettles the size of bathtubs at church picnics, political rallies, and county gatherings across the state. Traditionally, it was made from whatever meat was around, historically mutton, but also chicken, pork, and in the old days, squirrel and other game, simmered for a full day with corn, lima beans, potatoes, tomatoes, and okra, until every ingredient surrendered into a thick, smoky, brick-colored stew you could stand a spoon in. It was mass food, feeding hundreds at a time for pennies a bowl, the taste of a Kentucky gathering. Burgoo masters were local celebrities, guarding their proportions and stirring the kettle with a boat oar. Its enemy was never a competing recipe. It was the sheer, glorious impracticality of it. You cannot cook a bathtub of day-long stew in a chain kitchen, and you cannot sell a dish whose whole identity is that it takes a village and a full day. As the communal gatherings that produced it faded, so did burgoo. It survives at a few festivals, a ghost of Kentucky's shared table. Second pattern break. Notice what just happened across the South. The hot brown, the meat and 3 she crab soup, country captain, burgoo, these were not poverty foods. Several of them were the fanciest, most beloved dishes their cities had. And they still died. This is the part people get wrong about what the chains did to American food. It is easy to assume the lost meals were all cheap, humble things replaced by something better. But the chains did not win by making better food. They won by making faster food and by making the same food. A hot brown takes a cook and a broiler and a few minutes of attention per plate. A meat and 3 takes a steam table loaded with a dozen slow-cooked sides at dawn. Burgoo takes a full day and a kettle the size of a canoe. None of that fits a business built on speed, standardization, and a drive-through window. So the chains did not outcook these dishes. They outscaled them, out-advertised them, and outlasted the family owners who made them by hand. The tragedy is not that America chose worse food. It is that America chose sameness. And sameness cannot hold a broiler blistered hot brown or a day-long kettle of stew. Those things only exist when a real person decides they are worth the trouble. Number 70. Cincinnati, Ohio. Goetta. Cincinnati's German immigrants brought a thrift dish that became a breakfast institution. Goetta, a coarse mash of pork, beef, and steel-cut oats, seasoned with bay and thyme and pepper, cooked into a loaf, then sliced and fried crisp on a griddle. Where scrapple used cornmeal, goetta used oats, and that gave it a nuttier, chewier texture with a crackling brown crust. It came to the plate beside eggs at the diners and butcher counter kitchens of the German West Side, cheap protein stretched with grain to feed a family through the week. A slice cost pennies. Goetta is a survivor in Greater Cincinnati. A couple of family companies still make it, and the city throws a festival. But it never escaped the region, and the diner counters that once fried it for the morning shift have mostly closed. To the rest of America, a fried loaf of pork and oats is completely unknown. In Cincinnati, it is heritage. That gap between beloved in one city and invisible everywhere is the exact shape of what the chains erased. Number 69, Cleveland, Ohio, the Polish boy. Out of Cleveland's black and Polish neighborhoods came a sandwich that is a full meal balanced on a bun. A grilled kielbasa went onto a soft bun, then got buried under a mountain of French fries, a ladle of barbecue or hot sauce, and a heap of coleslaw, all stacked so high you had to compress it with both hands and eat fast before it collapsed. The layers were the genius. The crisp fries, the tangy cold slaw, the smoky sausage, and the sweet hot sauce all colliding in one impossible bite. It was cheap, filling street and carry-out food, born mid-century, sold for a couple of dollars at rib joints and corner stands. The Polish boy stayed intensely local, a Cleveland thing that Cleveland barely bothered to export. It survives at the city's barbecue counters, but it belongs to a category of food the chains never touched. Too messy, too regional, too tied to specific neighborhood joints to standardize. Outside Northeast Ohio, most people have never seen a sandwich wear its fries and slaw on the inside. Number 68, Barberton, Ohio, Barberton chicken. In the little town of Barberton, Serbian immigrants opened chicken houses in the 1930s and created a fried chicken so distinct it earned the town a nickname, the Fried Chicken Capital. The chicken was fried in lard and cast iron kettles, giving it a particular crackling, deeply browned crust, and it always came with two sides that made the meal: a spicy tomato and rice dish the locals call hot sauce, and a tangy vinegar coleslaw. A whole dinner cost a couple of dollars and was cooked to order in the same family-run chicken houses for generations. Barberton chicken was community food, tied to Serbian church tradition and a handful of specific restaurants, and it never franchised. The lard kettles and the from-scratch hot rice couldn't survive a corporate rollout. A few of the original chicken houses still run their kettles, but as fried chicken became a national chain product, churned out by the bucket, the idea that a single small town made the best version in lard, in cast iron, with a side of spicy rice became a well-kept Ohio secret. Number 67, Detroit, Michigan, the Boston Cooler. It has nothing to do with Boston. The Boston Cooler was Detroit's own soda fountain float, made specifically with Vernors, the sharp, aged, almost peppery ginger ale that Detroit invented and adored, blended with vanilla ice cream until it went thick and creamy and the ginger bite cut through the sweetness. A soda jerk built it at the fountain, sometimes blending it smooth like a shake, sometimes leaving it as a float with a fizzing head. It cost a dime and was the treat of a Detroit summer afternoon for the first half of the century. The whole thing depended on Vernor's unique aged in oak ginger flavor and on the soda fountain itself, that vanished institution with its spinning stools and its jerk who knew every regular's order. When the corner fountains closed and Vernor's became just another bottle on a supermarket shelf, the Boston Cooler lost the ritual that made it special. You can still make one at home, but the fountain where it lived and the city ritual around it is gone. Number 66, Upper Peninsula, Michigan, the Pasty. When Cornish miners came to work the copper and iron ranges of Michigan's Upper Peninsula in the 1800s, they brought the pasty, a hand-sized pie of beef, potato, rutabaga, and onion folded into a sturdy crust with a thick crimped edge along one side. That crimp was a handle. A miner could hold the pasty by the crust with dirty hands, eat the rest, and toss the crust away, and the whole thing stayed warm for hours deep in a cold mine shaft. Finnish immigrants adopted it too, and the pasty became the defining food of the UP, sold hot from bakeries and roadside stands for pocket change. It was portable, filling, and perfectly suited to hard labor in a cold place. The pasty survives in the UP as a point of fierce local pride, but it never traveled, and the mines that created it are long closed. To most Americans, a savory meat and root hand pie is a foreign curiosity, not the miner's lunch that once fueled an entire region. Number 65. Chicago, Illinois. Shrimp de jonge. In the late 1800s, a Belgian family running a Chicago restaurant created a dish so beloved it became one of the city's originals: whole shrimp baked in a casserole under a blanket of garlic, sherry, and butter-soaked breadcrumbs until the top went golden, and the whole thing perfumed the dining room with garlic and wine. It was rich, communal, elegant, ladled out of the baking dish tableside at Chicago's grand old restaurants and served over toast points. Shrimp de jonge was special occasion food, the dish you ordered to celebrate, and for decades it defined fine dining in the city. But it was a from-scratch casserole that took a real kitchen and a real cook, and as Chicago's independent white tablecloth restaurants gave way to national dining chains with laminated menus, a garlicky baked shrimp casserole invented by one immigrant family had no place to survive. A few classic Chicago rooms still make it. Most people who live in the city have never tasted the dish their own restaurants invented. Number 64. Chicago, Illinois. Chicken Vesuvio. Another Chicago original, born in the city's Italian restaurants in the early 1900s. Bone-in chicken and thick wedges of potato were browned hard in olive oil with a storm of garlic, then finished in the oven with white wine and oregano and a scatter of green peas, until the chicken skin crisped and the potatoes soaked up the garlicky wine. It supposedly took its name from the way the dish erupted with flavor, like the volcano. Chicken Vesuvio was the Sunday order at Chicago's family Italian rooms. A whole roasting pan of garlic and chicken and potatoes for a few dollars, meant to be shared. It required searing, roasting, and a cook's attention. None of it fast, none of it standardizable, and so it lived and died in independent kitchens. The Red Sauce Family Restaurant, that entire American institution, got flattened by casual dining chains selling a national idea of Italian food. Chicken Vesuvio hung on in a handful of old Chicago rooms, but the neighborhood restaurants that made it their own are mostly gone. Number 63. Chicago, Illinois. The mother-in-law. This one is almost too Chicago to explain. A mother-in-law was a corn tamale, the cheap kind, sold in a can or from a tamale cart, set inside a hot dog bun, then smothered in chili and onions like a Chicago-style tamale sandwich. It came out of the South and West Side neighborhoods in the mid-century, sold at hot dog stands and tamale carts for spare change, a way to turn a plain tamale into a filling handheld meal. Nobody quite agrees on where the strange name came from. It was working-class food at its purest, invented by people making something substantial out of the cheapest ingredients on the cart. The mother-in-law depended entirely on the corner tamale cart and the neighborhood hot dog stand, two things the chains steadily replaced. It survives at a scattering of old South Side stands, ordered by people who grew up on it, but it is one of the most endangered sandwiches in America, a genuine Chicago invention that even most Chicagoans have never heard of. Number 62. Springfield, Illinois. The horseshoe sandwich. Springfield built a monument to excess and called it lunch. A horseshoe started with thick toast, then a layer of meat, originally ham, later hamburger, chicken, whatever, then a mountain of French fries, and finally the whole thing was drowned in a rich, sharp cheese sauce, traditionally made with beer and a good-aged cheese. The name came from the horseshoe shape of the original ham cut, with the fries standing in for the nails. It was invented at a Springfield hotel in the 1920s and became the city's defining dish, an open-faced pile of meat, potatoes, and cheese sauce eaten with a fork for $1 or $2. A smaller version was, inevitably, a pony shoe. The horseshoe was too much, and that was the point, a gloriously indulgent plate you could only get in one Illinois capital. It survives in Springfield's local taverns and diners, but the cheese sauce made from scratch and the whole tradition of making it in a hotel kitchen ran head-on into an era of standardized casual dining. Outside Springfield, the horseshoe is unknown. Number 61, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Friday fish fry. In Milwaukee, the Friday fish fry was not a menu item. It was a civic institution, a weekly ritual rooted in the city's German and Catholic traditions. Every tavern, church basement, and supper club fried up beer-battered cod, perch, or walleye on Friday night and served it with a pile of French fries or German potato pancakes, a scoop of coleslaw, a slice of rye bread, and a little cup of tartar sauce. It was cheap and communal, a few dollars for a plate, and the whole neighborhood turned out. The fish fry was social glue as much as it was dinner. You saw everyone you knew across a long table on a Friday night. It hangs on in Wisconsin better than almost any dish on this list. But the version that mattered, the church basement and corner tavern fry cooked by volunteers and family owners, keeps shrinking as the taverns close. And the fast food fish sandwich offers the same idea with none of the community. The fish survives. The ritual is thinning. Number 60, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, frozen custard. This is not ice cream, and Wisconsin will correct you sharply. Frozen custard is made with egg yolks and churned in a special machine that whips in far less air, producing something denser, silkier, and richer than any ice cream, served fresh, soft, and cold from the machine, never hardened in a freezer. Milwaukee fell in love with it at the roadside custard stands that appeared in the 1930s, where a cone of the day's fresh flavor cost a nickel, and the line ran down the block on a summer night. The custard stand, with its walk-up window and its rotating flavor of the day, was a Milwaukee summer institution. Frozen custard survives at a devoted handful of Wisconsin stands, but the national soft-serve chains sold America a thinner, airier, cheaper version and called it the same thing, and most of the country never learned the difference. Real frozen custard, made with egg yolks and served the moment it leaves the machine, is a regional treasure hiding in plain sight behind an imitation that conquered everywhere else. Number 59, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Booyah. Booyah is a stew, but more than that, it is an event. Belgian immigrants in northeastern Wisconsin brought a tradition of cooking an enormous communal stew. Chicken, beef, and vegetables simmered in kettles for a full day, sometimes two, in batches big enough to feed hundreds. Church groups and volunteer fire departments would gather to stir the kettles overnight, and the whole community came to eat it from paper bowls for a couple of dollars, the proceeds going to some good cause. The name is thought to be a mangling of the French bouillon. Booyah was never restaurant food and never could be. Its entire identity was the giant kettle, the overnight stirring, the crowd of neighbors. That made it exactly the kind of thing that cannot survive when community life thins out and people eat alone in cars. Booyah still appears at Green Bay fundraisers and festivals, cooked by the last generation who learned to tend the kettles. But as a living tradition, it is fading, a dish that only exists when a whole town decides to make it together. Number 58, Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Juicy Lucy. Two Minneapolis bars have argued for 70 years over who invented it, and they spell it differently to spite each other. But the idea is genius either way. Instead of putting cheese on top of a burger, you seal a slice of American cheese inside two patties, Then griddle it so the cheese melts into a molten core that squirts out and burns your mouth at the first bite. That trapped liquid cheese center was a revelation, and it made the Juicy Lucy a South Minneapolis legend, sold for a couple of dollars at neighborhood taverns since the 1950s. The warning to let it cool was part of the ritual. Everyone got burned once. The Juicy Lucy survives at its rival bars and has even been imitated nationally. But the original, hand-formed, sealed by a cook who knew exactly how thick to make the patties so the cheese wouldn't blow out, belonged to a couple of corner bars in one city. It is a rare case of a lost-style dish that fought its way to fame, but the neighborhood tavern that birthed it is the endangered thing. Number 57, Sioux City, Iowa. The loose meat sandwich. In the 1920s, a Sioux City cook created a sandwich that looks like a sloppy Joe, but is nothing like it. Seasoned ground beef, cooked loose and crumbly and drained dry with no tomato sauce at all. Piled into a steamed bun with mustard, pickle, and onion. Because there was no sauce, it fell apart as you ate it, which is why it came with a spoon to chase the beef across the wrapper. Iowans called it a loose meat, or a tavern sandwich, and it spread across the state from a small chain of counters, cheap and fast, and filling for a nickel and later a quarter. The loose meat is the plainest food imaginable, just seasoned beef in a bun, and that plainness was its charm across the middle of the country. It survives at a few Iowa institutions, but it got overrun by the very thing it resembled: the saucy, standardized fast food burger and the canned sloppy Joe. Most Americans have eaten 100 sloppy Joes and never met the dry, crumbly, spoon-required original from Sioux City. Number 56, Des Moines, Iowa, Steak de Bourgeois. Here is a dish that exists, as far as anyone can tell, only in Des Moines, and no one is entirely sure where it came from. Steak de Bourgeois is a beef tenderloin, sautéed and served under a sauce of butter, garlic, and herbs, sometimes a cream sauce, sometimes a simpler garlic butter, depending on which Italian steakhouse in town you asked. It appeared in the Italian-American restaurants of Des Moines around the mid-century and became the city's signature special occasion order, the steak you got for an anniversary for a few dollars in its day. What makes it remarkable is how complete and local it is. A genuine regional steak preparation that never spread more than a few miles from where it was invented, kept alive by a handful of family steakhouses, each guarding its own version of the sauce. As chain steakhouses standardized what an American steak dinner looked like, Steak de Bourgeois had no path outward and no corporate champion. It survives in its home city as a point of pride and a mystery, a dish so local that leaving Des Moines means leaving it behind entirely. Third pattern break, something worth stopping on here in the middle of the country. Look at how many of these Midwestern dishes were communal. The fish fry, the booyah, the church kettle stews, the neighborhood tavern burger. This is the part of the story that gets lost when we only talk about flavor. These meals were not just food, they were the reason people gathered. The Friday fish fry was where a Milwaukee neighborhood saw itself once a week. Booyah was a whole town stirring a kettle through the night. The loose meat counter and the corner custard stand were where a small city ran into itself, over and over, generation after generation. When the chains arrived, they did not just replace the food, they replaced the gathering. A drive-through is efficient precisely because it removes the part where you sit down, see your neighbors, and belong to a place. That is the quiet thing America traded away. Not just recipes, but the rooms the recipes lived in and the people you used to see there. Every closed fish fry and dark custard window is a little less of a town knowing itself. The meals were the excuse. The gathering was the point. And you cannot get that back through a car window. Number 55, St. Louis, Missouri. The St. Paul sandwich. It is not from St. Paul, and no one can explain the name. In the Chinese-American restaurants of St. Louis, Cook's fried an egg, foo young patty, egg, bean sprouts, onion, and slid it between 2 slices of plain white bread with mayonnaise, pickle, lettuce, and tomato. That was the St. Paul, a Cantonese egg patty dressed like an American deli sandwich. It appeared mid-century as St. Louis's Chinese restaurants adapted to local tastes and budgets, and it cost about $1. A filling lunch you could order at any neighborhood carryout. The whole thing is a perfect little collision of 2 cultures forced together by economics. The St. Paul survives at St. Louis Chinese carryouts, but it is invisible everywhere else on Earth, a sandwich that only exists in one city's takeout kitchens. As those independent carryouts thin out under pressure from national fast food, even St. Louisans under a certain age have never ordered one. It is the kind of hyper-local invention the chains could never make and never needed to, so it simply exists, quietly, in one place, for now. Number 54, St. Louis, Missouri. The Slinger. The Slinger is a diner's answer to a hangover, and it is a monument to the all-night counter. Cooks laid down a base of hash browns, then 2 eggs, then 2 hamburger patties, buried the whole thing under a ladle of chili, and finished it with shredded cheese and raw onion. It came to the table at 3 in the morning, an enormous, greasy, glorious plate designed to soak up a long night for a couple of dollars. The Slinger belonged entirely to the 24-hour diner, that vanishing American institution where a cook stayed up all night for the bar crowd, the shift workers, and the lonely. It survives at a couple of legendary St. Louis diners, but the all-night counter itself is what is dying, squeezed out by fast food that closes its dining room and locks the doors while keeping only the drive-thru lit. The Slinger cannot live in a drive-thru. It needs a stool, a counter, a cook, and the strange fellowship of everyone else who is awake at that hour and needs to eat. Number 53, St. Louis, Missouri. The fried brain sandwich. St. Louis and the towns along the Mississippi once loved a sandwich that turns most modern stomachs. Thin sliced calf or pork brain, battered and deep fried until crisp, piled onto rye bread with raw onion, pickle, and mustard. It was cheap German butcher shop food, a way to use every part of the animal, sold at riverfront taverns and neighborhood counters for a nickel or a dime through the first half of the century. Fried brains were mild and creamy inside their crisp crust, and generations of St. Louis families ate them without a second thought. Then the tastes turned. Mad cow disease scares in the 1990s put restrictions on selling cattle brains, and the whole category of organ meat sandwiches slid off the menu. A single riverfront tavern or 2 still fry them from pork. The fried brain sandwich is one of the most thoroughly extinct dishes on this list, killed by changing appetites and safety rules, a reminder that some lost meals are not coming back, and that whole animal cooking was once ordinary lunch, not a chef's statement. Number 52, Springfield, Missouri. Cashew chicken. In 1963, a cook in Springfield, Missouri, married Chinese technique to Midwestern tastes and invented a dish that conquered the region: chunks of chicken, deep-fried like Southern fried chicken instead of stir-fried, then coated in a thick brown oyster sauce gravy and topped with cashews and green onion. It was Chinese food built for people who wanted their chicken crispy and their sauce gravy-like, and Springfield went so wild for it that the city claims cashew chicken as its own invention. Nearly every Chinese restaurant in southwest Missouri served a version, over rice, for a few dollars. This is a rare case of a genuinely new regional dish born in the middle of the 20th century, and it thrived because it came from independent family restaurants reading exactly what their local customers craved. Springfield-style cashew chicken survives across the Ozarks, but it never became a national menu item, and outside its home region, most people have only had the gloppy takeout version that shares the name, but not the deep-fried, gravy-drenched soul of the original. Number 51, Wichita, Kansas. The Bierock. When German-Russian immigrants, Mennonites who had farmed the Russian steppe before coming to the plains settled Kansas in the 1870s. They brought the bierock, a yeast dough bun stuffed with ground beef, cabbage, and onion, then baked until golden, sealing a hot, savory filling inside a soft bread pocket. It was portable, sturdy, and perfect for a farmer to carry into the fields for lunch, and it fed the wheat country of Kansas and Nebraska for generations. Bakeries and church kitchens sold them for a few cents each, and every Plains family had a recipe. The bierock is the ancestor of a fast food chain sandwich you may know, which took the idea and standardized it. But the handmade original, the dough, proofed and rolled and filled by hand, the beef and cabbage seasoned by feel, belonged to family bakeries and church basements. As those faded and the packaged version took over, the true homemade bierock became a heritage food, made mostly by the last generation who learned it from their grandmothers. Outside the German-Russian plains, almost no one knows the word. Number 50, Kansas City, Missouri. Burnt ends. Here is the strangest fate on this list, a dish that went from free garbage to the most prized thing on the menu and lost its soul in the process. Burnt ends are the crusty, charred, fatty tips of a smoked beef brisket, cooked so long and hard that the ends caramelize into intense, chewy, smoky nuggets. In old Kansas City barbecue joints, these tips were considered scraps. The pitmaster would slice the good brisket for paying customers and set the burnt ends aside, and regulars waiting in line would get handed a few for free, right off the cutting board, while they waited. That was the whole beautiful thing. Burnt ends were a gift, a taste the pitmaster gave you because you were there. Then someone realized they were the best part, put them on the menu, and turned them into a premium item. The free handful off the board, the generosity that defined an old KC barbecue counter, is gone. What remains is delicious and expensive, which is exactly not the point of what a burnt end used to be. Number 49, Omaha, Nebraska. The Reuben. Depending on who you believe, the Reuben was born in a poker game at Omaha's Blackstone Hotel in the 1920s, invented by a grocer named Reuben, who wanted a hearty sandwich for the players. Corned beef, Swiss cheese, sauerkraut, and Russian dressing were stacked on rye bread and grilled until the cheese melted, and the bread went crisp and buttery, the hot kraut and the cold dressing warring inside. Omaha claims it fiercely, and the hotel dining room served it as its signature for decades, a full and satisfying lunch for pocket change. The Reuben is one of the few dishes on this list that did go national, but that is exactly the problem. The version that spread is a pale, pressed cafeteria imitation of the grilled-to-order original from a real hotel kitchen. The Blackstone's dining room, where a cook built each one and grilled it fresh, is the thing that vanished. The sandwich survives everywhere and lives nowhere, a famous name attached to 100 mediocre copies of a dish an Omaha hotel once made with care. Number 48, Lincoln, Nebraska. The Runza. Nebraska took the German-Russian bierock, gave it a rectangular shape and a trademark name, and made it the state's own. The Runza, a pocket of yeast bread stuffed with seasoned ground beef, cabbage, and onion, baked until golden. Unlike most dishes on this list, the Runza actually did become a regional chain, which is why Nebraskans still eat them. But the homemade church basement and family kitchen Runza that came before the chain is the truly lost thing. Those were made by hand for fall festivals and Husker game days. The dough proofed overnight, the filling seasoned by a grandmother's judgment, sold to raise money for a church roof. The Runza is a fascinating hinge point in this whole story, proof that a regional immigrant dish could survive by becoming a chain, but only by trading the handmade original for a standardized product. Nebraskans love their Runzas, and they should, but the ones their great-grandmothers rolled out by hand, unique to each family, are nearly as extinct as everything else here. Number 47, New Orleans, Louisiana. Turtle soup. In New Orleans, turtle soup was the height of Creole restaurant cooking. a dark, thick, deeply savory soup of snapping turtle meat in a browned roux, spiked with sherry and floating with slices of hard-boiled egg and lemon. It appeared at the city's grand old Creole restaurants, where it was the opening act of a serious meal, and it carried the whole complexity of Louisiana cooking: the roux, the trinity of vegetables, the long simmer, the sherry at the end. Turtle was once abundant in the bayous and cheap, which is how it climbed onto white tablecloth menus. But turtle populations declined, harvesting became regulated, and the labor of butchering and simmering turtle meat for hours made it impossible for anything but a dedicated old-line kitchen to bother. A few historic New Orleans restaurants still make real turtle soup, but many now use a mock version, and the dish that once defined Creole fine dining is slipping toward the same fate as Philadelphia's snapper soup, a magnificent, labor-intensive relic that the modern restaurant economy has no room for. Number 46. New Orleans, Louisiana. Oysters Rockefeller. In 1899, a New Orleans restaurant created a dish so rich it was named for the richest man in America: oysters on the half-shell, baked on a bed of rock salt under a vivid green blanket of pureed herbs, greens, butter, and a splash of anise liqueur, until the topping set and the oyster warmed just through. The original recipe was, and remains, a fiercely guarded secret, and the restaurant that invented it has never revealed exactly what goes into the green sauce and swears it contains no spinach, despite 1,000 imitations that use it. Oysters. Rockefeller was celebration food, the opulent start to a grand New Orleans dinner when Gulf oysters were cheap and plentiful. The dish is technically still served, but the true version, made from the secret original formula in one historic dining room, is a world apart from the frozen, spinach-topped, mass-produced imitations that carry its name across the country. Like so much here, the name survived, and the soul was copied into meaninglessness, an invention of one kitchen, flattened into a generic appetizer everywhere else. Number 45. New Orleans, Louisiana. Yacamine. Deep in New Orleans' black neighborhoods lives a noodle soup that most tourists never see: yacamine, a bowl of spaghetti or wheat noodles in a rich, spiced beef broth, topped with sliced beef, a halved, hard-boiled egg, and green onion, seasoned with soy sauce and Creole spice and a shot of hot sauce. Its origins tangle Chinese, Creole, and African-American cooking, likely tracing back to the Chinese immigrant kitchens and the returning soldiers of a century ago. New Orleanians call it Old Sober because of its reputation as the ultimate hangover cure, and it was sold cheap from corner stores, second-line parades, and neighborhood kitchens for a couple of dollars. Yacamine is a genuine New Orleans original that the tourist economy and the chains completely ignored, which is both why it survived underground and why it is invisible to most of America. It lives in the hands of a few local cooks, often women selling it from coolers at street events, and it is exactly the kind of deeply local, immigrant-rooted comfort food that a standardized food economy has no category for. Number 44. New Orleans, Louisiana. Mile High Ice Cream Pie. At one grand New Orleans restaurant, dessert was a spectacle. Layers of chocolate, vanilla, and peppermint ice cream stacked impossibly high on a pastry crust, frozen solid, then covered in a towering swirl of meringue, browned fast under intense heat, so the outside caramelized while the ice cream inside stayed frozen, and finished with a pour of chocolate sauce at the table. It was theater as much as dessert, a mountain of pie that made the whole dining room turn to look. This kind of over-the-top restaurant showpiece, the tableside flourish, the impossible construction, the dessert built to astonish, was a hallmark of the grand mid-century American restaurant, and it took a real pastry kitchen and a real cook to pull off. The chains replaced it with a photograph on a laminated menu and a slice pulled from a freezer. The Mile High Pie survives at its home restaurant, but the whole culture of the astonishing made-to-order restaurant dessert, built to make a table gasp, has almost entirely disappeared from American dining. Number 43. Natchitoches, Louisiana, the meat pie. In the old French colonial town of Natchitoches, the oldest settlement in the Louisiana Purchase, the local specialty is a hand pie that predates the United States. Seasoned ground beef and pork, browned with onions and Creole spice, sealed inside a crescent of pastry and deep-fried until golden and crackling. It was street food and festival food, sold hot from stands and home kitchens for pocket change, a portable pocket of spiced meat that fed the town for 2 centuries. The Natchitoches meat pie is a beautiful example of a food so tied to one place that the town holds a festival for it, yet it remains almost unknown 100 miles away. It survives locally, cooked by families and a few dedicated makers, but the deep-fried, hand-crimped, from-scratch original never had a path into the national food economy. Too regional, too handmade, too tied to one old French town's identity. Outside central Louisiana, a spiced meat pie fried to order is a discovery, not a tradition, which is exactly how the chains left so much of America's real food behind. Number 42. Jackson, Mississippi, comeback sauce. In the Greek-owned restaurants of Jackson, Mississippi, cooks in the 1930s created a sauce so good that customers, they said, kept coming back for it. Mayonnaise, chili sauce, oil, garlic, and a dozen other things whisked into a tangy, spicy, addictive dressing that Jackson put on everything. Salads, crackers, fried seafood, fingers dipped straight in. Every Greek restaurant in the city had its own secret formula, guarded jealously, and comeback sauce became the unofficial condiment of central Mississippi. It cost nothing to make and turned a plain plate of fried fish into something people drove across town for. Comeback sauce survives in Jackson, but it is intensely regional. Most Americans have never heard of it, and the immigrant-run restaurants that invented it, each with its own guarded recipe, are exactly the kind of independent establishment that national chains have steadily replaced. It is one of the great secret condiments of American food, born in one city, perfected by immigrant families, and still almost completely unknown beyond the place that loves it. Number 41. Corinth, Mississippi, the slug burger. During the lean years of the Depression, a cook in Corinth, Mississippi stretched a burger by cutting the beef with a cheap filler, originally soybean meal, later flour or potato flour, then deep frying the thin patty until it crisped, and serving it on a bun with mustard, pickle, and onion. It cost a nickel, which in the slang of the time was a slug, and that gave the sandwich its unappetizing but beloved name. The slug burger was pure economic survival, a way to make a little meat feed a lot of people, and it fed the working poor of northeast Mississippi and Tennessee through the hardest years. It survives at a handful of Corinth counters, and the town even holds a slug burger festival. But it belongs to a vanished category of Depression-era stretch foods, invented purely to make scarcity edible. As real beef got cheap and the chain sold burgers by the billion, the fried, filler-stretched nickel burger had no reason to exist except memory. It hangs on in one Mississippi town, a crispy little monument to getting by. Fourth pattern break. Here is a thread running through the last stretch that deserves a hard look. Count how many of these came from immigrants and outsiders cooking cheap. The Greek diner owners of Jackson, the Chinese carry-out cooks of St. Louis, the German-Russian bakers of Kansas, the Depression cook stretching a nickel burger with soybean meal. American regional food is overwhelmingly immigrant food and poverty food. It is what people made when they arrived somewhere new with little money and had to feed a family and maybe sell a plate to a neighbor. That is where nearly every dish worth remembering came from, not from wealth, but from need and ingenuity and the collision of a homeland recipe with whatever was cheap and local. The chains sold America a fantasy that food should be predictable, branded, and the same everywhere. But every single thing on this list proves the opposite. The food worth eating came from a specific person, in a specific place, solving a specific problem with what they had. Comeback sauce exists because a Greek family in Mississippi wanted you to come back. The St. Paul sandwich exists because a Chinese cook in St. Louis met a Midwestern lunch counter halfway. You cannot mass-produce that. You can only erase it and then sell everyone the same thing and call it progress. Number 40. Greenville, Mississippi. Delta hot tamales. Deep in the Mississippi Delta, in the heart of the cotton country, you will find hot tamales. And how they got there is one of the great mysteries of American food. Cornmeal masa was wrapped around spiced ground pork or beef, rolled in a corn husk, and simmered in a spicy, greasy broth, then sold hot by the dozen from stands and street carts, tied up in a paper sack that's soaked through with red grease. They likely came from Mexican laborers who worked the Delta cotton fields alongside black sharecroppers in the early 1900s. And black Delta cooks made the dish their own, spicier, and simmered rather than steamed. A sack of tamales cost pocket change and fed a family, sold from the tamale man's cart on a Saturday. Delta hot tamales survive at a few legendary stands and are celebrated on the Mississippi Tamale Trail, but they belong to a specific, fading world of street vendors and family cooks. Most Americans have never had a tamale simmered in spicy grease and handed over hot in a greasy paper sack, which is precisely what the Delta perfected and the wider country never knew. Number 39. Memphis, Tennessee. Barbecue spaghetti. Only in Memphis would someone think to put pulled pork barbecue on spaghetti and turn it into a beloved local dish. Cooked spaghetti was tossed in a barbecue sauce enriched with the drippings and the tangy tomato and vinegar flavor of the pit, then topped with chopped smoked pork shoulder, a plate that was somehow Italian and barbecue and entirely Memphis at once. It appeared at the city's black-owned barbecue joints mid-century, a way to stretch the smoked pork and serve something filling and cheap, and it became a fixture on the barbecue shack menu for a couple of dollars. Barbecue spaghetti is a genuine original, invented at a specific pit and spread through the city's barbecue culture, and it survives at Memphis institutions to this day. But it never traveled because it belonged to a world of independent, family-run barbecue joints, each with its own pit and its own sauce. Exactly the kind of establishment the chains cannot replicate and steadily displace. Outside Memphis, the idea of barbecue on spaghetti sounds like a joke. In Memphis, it is lunch. Number 38. Mobile, Alabama. West Indies salad. On the Gulf Coast in the 1940s, a restaurant in Mobile created a dish of stunning simplicity that became the city's signature. Fresh lump crab meat, marinated in nothing more than chopped onion, oil, cider vinegar, and ice water, chilled for hours, and served cold. That was it. No mayonnaise, no cooking, no heavy seasoning, just sweet Gulf crab, bright acid, and raw onion, letting the quality of the crab speak. West Indies salad was celebration food when Gulf crab was abundant and cheap, served at Mobile restaurants and home tables as the taste of the coast. It survives around Mobile Bay, a point of deep local pride, but as crab got expensive and the independent Gulf seafood houses that made it gave way to chains, the dish stayed penned in its home region. Its very simplicity is what makes it a treasure and what makes it invisible. There is nothing to franchise, no secret process, just great crab and restraint. Beyond the Alabama Gulf Coast, almost no one has tasted the marinated crab salad Mobile considers its own. Number 37. Decatur, Alabama. White barbecue sauce. Everywhere else in America, barbecue sauce is red or brown. In North Alabama, around Decatur, it is white, a tangy, peppery sauce of mayonnaise, vinegar, and black pepper. Invented at a Decatur barbecue pit in 1925. Whole chickens were smoked over hickory, then dunked or drizzled in the cool white sauce, which cut the smoke with sharp acid and creamy richness in a way no tomato sauce could. It was a North Alabama specialty, sold at the pit for a couple of dollars, and for decades it was almost unknown 20 miles outside its home county. White barbecue sauce is one of the most distinctive regional creations in American food, a genuine local invention tied to one pit and one town. It has spread a little in recent years as barbecue enthusiasts discovered it, but the original smoked chicken, pulled straight from a hickory pit and bathed in mayonnaise-based sauce at a family-run stand, belongs to a specific Alabama tradition. Most of the country still has no idea barbecue sauce can be white, which tells you exactly how well the chain's flattened American variety. Number 36, San Antonio, Texas. Chili con carne, from the Chili Queens. Before chili came from a can, it came from the Chili Queens of San Antonio. In the plazas of the old city from the 1880s into the 1930s, women set up open-air stalls at night, cooking pots of chili con carne over open fires, a stew of chopped or ground beef, dried chilies, cumin, and garlic, dark and spicy and thick, and serving it by lamplight to anyone with a few pennies. The plazas came alive after dark with music and the smell of chili, and cowboys, travelers, and locals ate side by side at rough wooden tables. The Chili Queens essentially invented chili as America knows it, and their bowls of red were the original Tex-Mex, cooked fresh in the open air. The city eventually shut the stalls down over health regulations, and chili moved into cans and chain kitchens, standardized and thinned into something the Queens would barely recognize. The open-air Plaza Chili of San Antonio, cooked by women over fire and served under the stars, is completely gone, the vibrant birthplace of a dish that conquered the country. Number 35, San Antonio, Texas. The Puffy Taco. San Antonio's own taco is unlike any other. Instead of a flat or crisp fried shell, the fresh masa is pressed thin and dropped into hot oil, where it puffs up like a pillow, staying soft and chewy inside with a light, crisp outside, then folded around picadillo, cheese, lettuce, and tomato. That puffing, the way the fresh masa balloons, the instant it hits the oil, is the whole art, and it only works with fresh ground masa fried to order. Puffy tacos came out of San Antonio's Mexican-American kitchens and became a city signature, sold at family restaurants for pocket change. They survive at San Antonio institutions, but the technique cannot be pre-made or shipped or standardized. A puffy taco has to be pressed and fried in the moment, or it collapses. That is exactly why the chains never touched it, and exactly why it stayed local. The hard-shell taco the chain sold the whole country is a distant industrial cousin of the fresh-fried, puffy taco that San Antonio families have been making by hand for generations. Number 34, Amarillo, Texas. Chicken fried steak. It is one of the most Texan things imaginable, and the real version is nearly gone, even in Texas. A cheap, tough cut of beef was pounded thin, dredged in seasoned flour, and fried like fried chicken until the crust went golden and shattering, then smothered in a peppery cream gravy made from the pan drippings. It came with mashed potatoes and more gravy, an enormous plate of comfort for $1 or $2 at the cafes and truck stops of the Texas Panhandle. Chicken fried steak was Depression thrift, a way to make a bad cut of beef taste like something that became a beloved staple across Texas and the Plains. The trouble is that the real thing takes a cook pounding and dredging and frying each steak to order and making gravy from scratch in the pan. The frozen, pre-breaded factory version that chains and freezer aisles sell is a sad shadow of it. The hand-pounded, scratch gravy, chicken fried steak of a real Texas cafe survives, but it is fading behind an industrial imitation that shares only the name. Number 33, Dallas, Texas. The corny dog. At the State Fair of Texas in the 1940s, a family took a hot dog, dipped it in a thick cornmeal batter, and deep-fried it on a stick, inventing the corny dog, the corn dog, to the rest of the country. Fresh from the fryer, the cornbread crust went crisp and golden around the juicy dog inside. eaten off the stick with a stripe of yellow mustard, and it became the defining taste of the Texas fare, sold by the millions each autumn. The corny dog is a fascinating case because the original, hand-dipped in fresh batter and fried to order at the fairgrounds, is genuinely wonderful, while the frozen supermarket corn dog that spread across America is a pale, mushy imitation reheated from a box. The fair version survives gloriously once a year, made the original way at the stand that invented it. But the everyday corn dog most Americans have eaten is the industrial descendant, and almost no one outside the Texas fairgrounds has tasted the hand-dipped, fried-to-order original that started it all. Number 32. Eagle Pass, Texas. The original nachos. In 1943, at a restaurant just across the border serving American patrons from the Texas side, a maitre d' named Ignacio, Nacho to everyone, improvised a snack for a group of late-arriving customers. He cut tortillas into triangles, fried them, topped each one with a bit of melted cheese and a slice of pickled jalapeno, and served them. He called them nachos especiales, and the name stuck, minus the apostrophe. The original nachos were nothing like the gloppy stadium version America knows now. They were a careful, individual construction, each chip topped by hand with real cheese and one slice of jalapeno, a small, elegant snack for a few cents. As nachos went national, they became a pile of chips, drowned in fluorescent processed cheese sauce dumped from a pump, sold at ballparks and movie theaters. The handmade, chip-by-chip original, a specific man's spur-of-the-moment invention on the border, got buried under an industrial imitation that would have embarrassed the man who created them. Number 31. Santa Fe, New Mexico. The Green Chile Cheeseburger. New Mexico took the American cheeseburger and made it unmistakably its own by adding the one thing New Mexico puts on everything: roasted green chile. Hatch green chiles were roasted until the skins blistered and blackened, peeled and piled hot onto a cheeseburger. The smoky, fruity, sinus-clearing heat cutting through the beef and cheese in a way ketchup never could. It became the signature burger of the state, sold at every roadside diner, drive-in, and hole-in-the-wall from Santa Fe to the smallest mountain town for a couple of dollars. The green chili cheeseburger depends entirely on real New Mexico chili, roasted in season, which is exactly why it stayed a New Mexico thing and never became a chain product, because you cannot ship the freshly roasted Hatch chili that makes it sing. It survives across New Mexico, fiercely defended, with towns competing over who makes the best one. But outside the state, the green chili cheeseburger is a rumor, and the national chains kept selling the same plain burger New Mexico improved on decades ago. Number 30. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Frito pie. It is served traditionally in the bag. A single-serving bag of Fritos was split open down the side, and chile con carne, New Mexico red chili with beans, was ladled right into the bag, then topped with shredded cheese and raw onion and eaten with a plastic fork straight from the foil. The corn chips softened just enough under the hot chile while keeping some crunch, and the whole thing cost about $1 at lunch counters, drive-ins, and famously at the counter of a Santa Fe 5 and dime. Frito pie is depression and after-ingenuity, a full hot meal built from a bag of chips and a ladle of chili. And it became a New Mexico and Texas staple sold at ball games, fairs, and dime store counters. It survives, but the dime store lunch counter that made it famous, that vanished American institution where you could get a hot, cheap meal while you shopped, is almost entirely gone, taken out by the same retail chains that killed the local 5 and dime. The Frito pie outlived the counter that made it a legend. Number 29. Pueblo, Colorado. The Slopper. In the steel town of Pueblo, Colorado, the local specialty is gloriously named and gloriously messy. The Slopper, an open-faced cheeseburger drowned in a ladle of Pueblo green chile, a pork and green chile stew, so thoroughly that you eat the whole thing with a fork off the plate. The Pueblo green chile, made with the town's own prized chili peppers, is the star. Thick, meaty, spicy, and unlike the chili of anywhere else. The slopper came out of Pueblo's family diners and taverns mid-century, cheap and filling for the steelworkers. A burger you couldn't pick up if you tried. It survives at a couple of legendary Pueblo joints, and the town is proud of it. But it belongs entirely to Pueblo, the specific local chili, the specific family diners, the specific steel town appetite that created it. The slopper is a perfect example of a dish so tied to one town's ingredients and identity that it simply cannot exist anywhere else, which is why the chains never touched it, and why almost no one outside southern Colorado has ever heard the word. Number 28, Denver, Colorado, the Denver sandwich. Before it became a diner omelet, it was a sandwich, and it has a history tangled up with the American West. A Denver omelet, beaten eggs cooked with diced ham, onion, and green pepper, was folded between two slices of bread and eaten cold or hot, a portable meal supposedly favored by cowboys, railroad workers, and Chinese cooks on the frontier who may have adapted egg foo young for Western tastes. It cost pocket change at the lunch counters and railroad cafes of the West, filling and easy to eat on the move. The Denver eventually shed its bread and became a standard omelet on every American breakfast menu, which means the sandwich itself, the folded, handheld original that fed people crossing the frontier, quietly disappeared. Almost no one orders a Denver sandwich anymore. They order the omelet and never know it started between two slices of bread. It is a small vanishing, but a telling one. Even when a dish survives, the specific form it started in, tied to a specific time and place and people, can slip away completely. Number 27, Las Vegas, Nevada, the 50-cent shrimp cocktail. For decades, the greatest food deal in America sat on the counter of a Las Vegas casino, a full shrimp cocktail. A tulip glass packed with small bay shrimp over cocktail sauce for 50 cents, sometimes 99 cents. It was introduced in the late 1950s as a loss leader to lure gamblers, and it worked. People lined up around the clock for cold shrimp at a price that couldn't possibly turn a profit, and the casino made its money at the tables. The 50-cent shrimp cocktail became a Vegas institution, a symbol of the old town's philosophy that food was bait, not profit, and that a working stiff should be able to eat like a high roller for pocket change. As corporate ownership took over the Strip and every square foot had to earn its keep, the loss leader era ended. The famous shrimp cocktail crept up in price and mostly vanished. It was never really about the shrimp. It was about a whole vanished idea of Las Vegas, where the house fed you cheap because it could afford to, and that Vegas is gone. Number 26, Tucson, Arizona, the Sonoran hot dog. On the Arizona-Sonora border, the humble hot dog became something spectacular. A Frankfurter was wrapped in bacon and grilled, then nestled into a soft, sturdy, bolillo-style roll and loaded with pinto beans, chopped tomato, onion, mustard, mayonnaise, a green salsa, and often a roasted chili pepper on the side. A hot dog turned into a full, overflowing meal. It came from Sonora, Mexico, and settled into Tucson's food carts and stands, sold for a couple of dollars from carts that set up at night, the bacon smoke drifting down the street. The Sonoran hot dog is a genuine border creation, a collision of American and Mexican street food, and it thrives on Tucson's carts and taquerias. But it belongs to that world of independent street vendors and family stands, the exact opposite of a standardized chain product. And outside the border region, most Americans have never seen a hot dog wrapped in bacon and buried under beans and salsa. It is one of the great living regional foods, still local, still handmade, still waiting for most of the country to discover it. Fifth pattern break. Stop and notice something about the last handful, because it points at the one force even bigger than the chains. The green chili cheeseburger, the Sonoran hot dog, The original nachos, the puffy taco, the chili queens. These are all border foods, Mexican and American cooking colliding into something new. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Some of the most vibrant food in this country came from exactly the communities the country was often least willing to credit. The chili queens invented America's chili and got shut down by the city. Nacho invented the nacho and never saw a dime from the billion-dollar industry it became. Chinese cooks on the frontier may have shaped the Denver omelet and never got their names attached. Over and over, an immigrant or a border cook or a black pitmaster invented something extraordinary, and then a corporation stripped it down, standardized it, slapped a brand on it, and sold it back to the whole country as its own. The chains did not just erase regional food, they industrialized other people's genius and erased the people. When you eat a stadium nacho, you are eating the flattened ghost of one man's kindness to some hungry customers in 1943. That is worth remembering every time somebody tells you the chain simply gave people what they wanted. Number 25, Los Angeles, California. The French dip. Two Los Angeles institutions have argued for a century over who invented it, but the idea belonged to old downtown LA. Thin sliced roast beef piled on a French roll, and the whole sandwich, or just the cut face of the roll, dipped into the beef's own hot roasting juices, the au jus, until the bread went soft and dripping and savory. One origin story says a cook accidentally dropped a roll in the drippings. Another says a customer with sore gums asked for his bread softened. Either way, it was born in the 1900s to feed the workers and travelers of downtown, and it cost a quarter. The French dip survives at its two warring birthplaces, both still open, both still slicing beef and ladling juice at communal tables. But the world it came from, the downtown lunch counter serving railroad men and factory workers a hot beef sandwich for pocket change, is nearly gone everywhere else. Most Americans know a pale, chain restaurant version of the French dip and have never had one dipped fresh from a real roasting pan. Number 24, Los Angeles, California. The Cobb salad. In the 1930s, at the Brown Derby restaurant in Hollywood, the owner supposedly raided the kitchen late one night and chopped together whatever he found: lettuce, tomato, bacon, chicken breast, hard-boiled egg, avocado, chives, blue cheese, and a wine vinegar dressing into a composed salad arranged in neat rows of color. He named it for himself, Bob Cobb, and it became the dish the movie stars ordered at the Derby, the salad you got to be seen eating in Hollywood's golden age. The Cobb was elegant, abundant, and theatrical. Each ingredient chopped fine and laid out in stripes before being tossed. It did become a national menu item, which is exactly why the original is lost. The version that spread is a careless pile, not the precisely composed, chopped-to-order salad of the Brown Derby, and the Derby itself is long closed. The Cobb salad is famous everywhere and made properly almost nowhere. A Hollywood original reduced to a default menu filler, its birthplace demolished, its careful construction forgotten. Number 23, Los Angeles, California. Chicken and waffles. The pairing came north with the Great Migration, out of the soul food kitchens of the South and Harlem, and found a second home in the black neighborhoods of Los Angeles. Crisp fried chicken laid over a hot waffle, drenched in butter and syrup. The sweet and the savory and the crunchy and the soft all colliding on one plate. In Los Angeles, it became a late-night institution, served to musicians and night shift workers after the clubs closed. A meal that was breakfast and dinner at once, for a few dollars. Chicken and waffles has since gone national and even upscale, appearing on trendy brunch menus everywhere. But the original, served all night at a family-run soul food spot to the after-hours crowd, cooked to order by people who carried the recipe up from the South, belonged to specific neighborhoods and specific communities. As those independent spots got priced out and the dish became a brunch cliché, The soul and the setting that made it meaningful thinned out, leaving the plate without the world that gave it life. Number 22, Los Angeles, California. The chili size. At a downtown Los Angeles chili stand in the early 1900s, a place with the unfortunate but honest name Ptomaine Tommy's, a cook served a hamburger patty in a bowl and ladled chili over it. And when customers wanted the chili with a burger, they asked for the size, meaning the hamburger size. And the name stuck. A chili size was an open-faced burger, drowned in chili and cheese and onion, eaten with a fork. It became the definitive Los Angeles working-class lunch of the early 20th century. Cheap and filling, sold from chili parlors all over downtown for a dime. The chili size and the chili parlor that served it are almost completely extinct now, wiped out by the burger chains that took the same idea, beef, chili, and cheese, and industrialized it into the chili burger sold at drive-thrus. The parlor, with its counter and its simmering pot of chili and its regulars, is gone. The chili size lives on only in the faint echo of the chili burgers that replaced the places that invented it. Number 21, San Francisco, California. Cioppino. When Italian immigrant fishermen settled San Francisco's wharf in the late 1800s, they made cioppino, a tomato and wine seafood stew loaded with whatever the day's catch left over. Dungeness crab, clams, mussels, shrimp, and firm fish, all simmered in a garlicky, herby tomato broth and served with crusty sourdough to sop it up. The name is thought to come from the fishermen calling out to chip in a bit of catch to the communal pot. It was fishermen's food, made from the unsold remainder, cheap and abundant when the bay was full of crab, served at the wharf's Italian restaurants for a few dollars. Cioppino survives at San Francisco's old seafood houses, but it belongs to a vanished world of working fishermen and family-run wharf restaurants, and it depends entirely on fresh local seafood that has grown scarce and expensive. The messy, communal, catch-of-the-day stew that immigrant fishermen invented is now a pricey restaurant dish, and the wharf that made it a way of life has become mostly a memory, dressed up for tourists. Number 20, San Francisco, California. Green Goddess dressing. In 1923, a chef at San Francisco's Palace Hotel created a dressing to honor a play called The Green Goddess, a brilliant green blend of mayonnaise, anchovy, tarragon, chives, parsley, and vinegar, whipped into a herbaceous, savory sauce that turned a plate of plain lettuce or cold chicken into something elegant. It became the signature of the hotel's dining room and then a national sensation. The dressing that defined chic American salads for decades. Green Goddess did survive in name, sold in bottles on grocery shelves. But that is precisely the loss. The bottled version is a shadow of the fresh, herb-packed, anchovy-sharp original made by hand in a grand hotel kitchen. The Palace still makes it, but the fresh herb dressing that a real chef whipped up to order has been replaced almost everywhere by a stabilized, muted supermarket imitation. Green Goddess is a case study in how the chains and the food industry can keep a name alive while quietly killing everything that made the original worth naming. Number 19, San Francisco, California. Joe's Special. Out of San Francisco's Italian restaurants in the early 1900s came a scramble that is pure improvisation. Ground beef browned with spinach, onion, mushrooms, and garlic, then bound with scrambled eggs, all cooked fast in one pan. Legend says a hungry musician came into a restaurant called New Joe's after hours and asked the cook to throw something together, and this is what came out. It became a beloved San Francisco late-night and hangover dish, cheap and hearty and endlessly riffed on, sold at the city's Italian joints for a couple of dollars. Joe's Special survives at a few old San Francisco restaurants, but it belongs to that vanished culture of the family Italian place that stayed open late and would cook you whatever you needed from whatever was in the kitchen. That kind of place, improvisational, personal, open at odd hours for the odd crowd, is exactly what the chains replaced with fixed menus and fixed hours. Joe's Special is a monument to the cook who would make you something special, off menu, because you were hungry. Number 18. San Francisco, California. Hangtown Fry. Born in the California Gold Rush, the Hangtown Fry was the most extravagant breakfast the frontier could offer. Oysters and bacon fried together and bound with scrambled eggs, combining 3 of the most expensive ingredients a Gold Rush cook could get his hands on. Legend says a newly rich miner in the town of Placerville, nicknamed Hangtown for its frequent executions, demanded the costliest dish possible, and the cook combined oysters, eggs, and bacon, each of which had to be hauled in at wild expense. It became a San Francisco restaurant classic, a symbol of sudden gold rush wealth, served at the city's old dining rooms for generations. Hangtown Fry survives at a handful of historic San Francisco spots, but it belongs to a very specific moment in American history and a very specific kind of grand old restaurant. As those rooms closed and California dining modernized, the strange, decadent, oyster and bacon scramble that once shouted new money faded into an obscure historical curiosity that almost no one orders anymore. Number 17. Seattle, Washington. Crab Louie. Up and down the West Coast, from San Francisco to Seattle to Portland, the Grand Hotel and Seafood House lunch of the early 1900s was the Crab Louie, a mound of fresh Dungeness crab meat piled over crisp lettuce, ringed with tomato, hard-boiled egg, and asparagus, and dressed with a pink Thousand Island-style dressing. It was the elegant ladies' lunch and businessman's lunch salad of the Pacific Coast, showcasing the sweet local Dungeness crab that was once cheap and plentiful, served at department store tea rooms and hotel dining rooms for $1 or $2. Nobody can agree which city or Louis it was named for. Crab Louie survives at a few Northwest seafood houses, but the world that made it, the abundant, cheap Dungeness, the department store tea room, the Grand Hotel lunch counter, has largely disappeared. Crab got expensive, the tea rooms closed, and the Louie became a rare and pricey thing. The salad that once said Pacific Coast Abundance is now a nostalgic order at the dwindling old-line restaurants that still remember it. Number 16. Salt Lake City, Utah. Fry sauce. In 1948, a Salt Lake City drive-in owner mixed ketchup and mayonnaise with a few secret seasonings and started serving it with French fries, and Utah never went back. Fry sauce, that pink, tangy, creamy blend, became the regional condiment of Utah and the Mountain West, served with fries and burgers at the local drive-ins for generations. So ingrained that Utahns are baffled the rest of the country dips fries in plain ketchup. It cost nothing to make and turned a plain order of fries into something people craved. And every local burger stand had its own guarded ratio. Fry sauce survives. Some regional chains even bottle it now. But the original belonged to the independent Utah Drive-In, that vanishing institution of the car hop and the walk-up window. As the national burger chains blanketed the state selling ketchup packets, the local drive-in with its secret pink sauce became endangered. Fry sauce is one of the great regional condiments hiding in plain sight, beloved in one corner of the country and unknown across most of the rest. Number 15. Indianapolis, Indiana. The breaded pork tenderloin sandwich. In Indiana and across the pork belt, the sandwich to get was the breaded tenderloin, a pork loin pounded out flat and wide, often comically wider than the bun, hanging off all sides like a dinner plate on a coaster, then breaded and deep-fried until golden and crisp, and served on a small hamburger bun with pickle, onion, and mustard. The absurd size was the whole point of pride. The meat was supposed to dwarf the bun. It came from the German pork traditions of the Midwest, a cousin of the schnitzel, and it fed Indiana at diners and drive-ins for a couple of dollars. The pork tenderloin sandwich survives across Indiana and the surrounding states, fiercely beloved, with towns competing over whose is biggest. but it belongs to the independent diner and drive-in, and the hand-pounded, fresh-breaded, fried-to-order original is a world away from the frozen. Uniform pork patty, the chains and freezer aisles sell. Outside the pork belt, most Americans have never seen a tenderloin the size of a hubcap. Number 14. Winchester, Indiana. Sugar cream pie. Indiana's official state pie is a relic of frontier necessity, made when there was no fresh fruit to be had. A simple custard of cream, sugar, flour, and vanilla, poured into a crust and baked until it set into a soft, quivering, caramel-sweet filling, dusted with nutmeg on top. It needed no eggs and no fruit, just the cream, sugar, and flour that a farm family always had, which is why the Amish and Quaker settlers of Indiana leaned on it through the long months when nothing grew. It was cheap, humble, desperation dessert that turned out to be delicious, sold at rural diners and church suppers and roadside stands for pocket change. Sugar cream pie survives in Indiana, made by a few dedicated bakeries and Amish kitchens. But the country diner and the church supper table that spread it are fading. It is a perfect little emblem of American regional food, born from scarcity, made from nothing, beloved by the people who grew up on it, and completely unknown to a country that now buys its pie from a chain freezer case. Number 13. Tampa, Florida. The Cuban sandwich, the Tampa way. Miami claims the Cuban sandwich, but Tampa built it first in the cigar factory neighborhood of Ybor City. And the Tampa version has one ingredient the rest of the country leaves out: Genoa salami, added by the Italian immigrants who lived alongside the Cuban and Spanish workers. Ham, roast pork, salami, Swiss cheese, pickle, and mustard were layered on Cuban bread, then pressed on a hot plancha until the bread flattened and crisped and the cheese melted through. It was the lunch of the cigar rollers, cheap and portable and pressed to order at the neighborhood cafes and bakeries for pocket change. The Tampa Cuban is a genuine multicultural invention. Cuban, Spanish, Italian, and Sicilian workers all leaving their mark on one sandwich. And it survives in Ybor City, defended fiercely against the salami-less Miami version. But the immigrant cafe culture that created it, the workers' neighborhood cafes, pressing sandwiches all day, is disappearing. And most of America knows only the flattened chain cafe imitation of a sandwich 3 immigrant communities built together. Number 12. Buffalo, New York. Sponge candy. Buffalo has a candy almost no one outside Western New York has ever tasted. Sponge candy, a light, crunchy honeycomb toffee made by whipping air into hot caramelized sugar so it sets full of tiny, crisp bubbles, then coating the whole airy shard in chocolate. It shatters and dissolves on the tongue, sweet and burnt sugar rich. And it was made by the local candy shops of Buffalo and the Great Lakes region for over a century, sold by the box for a few dollars. The catch is that sponge candy is notoriously hard to make. The sugar work is fussy, and humidity ruins it, so it could never really be mass-produced or shipped far, which kept it a fiercely local specialty made by family candy shops. Those shops still make it around Buffalo, but the regional candy maker is a dying breed, squeezed out by the national candy brands that fill every checkout aisle in the country with the same dozen bars. Sponge candy is a delicious little proof that even candy used to be regional before sameness took the checkout aisle too. Number 11. Chicago, Illinois. The Jibarito. In the 1990s, a Puerto Rican restaurant owner in Chicago's Humboldt Park neighborhood read about a sandwich idea and ran with it, creating the Jibarito. Instead of bread, 2 flattened fried green plantains served as the buns, holding garlicky steak, lettuce, tomato, cheese, and a swipe of mayo garlic sauce. The fried plantain was crisp and starchy and savory, a completely different foundation from bread, and it made the sandwich unmistakably Puerto Rican and unmistakably Chicago. The jibarito spread through the city's Puerto Rican restaurants and became a genuine Chicago original, sold for a few dollars in the neighborhoods that created it. It is one of the youngest dishes on this list, proof that American cities were still inventing new regional food as recently as a generation ago. Food born from a specific immigrant community meeting a specific city. But it lives in independent neighborhood restaurants, the exact establishments under constant pressure from chains and rising rents. And outside Chicago's Puerto Rican community, most Americans have never heard of a sandwich built on fried plantains. Sixth pattern break. We are down to the final 10, and here is where the whole story clicks into place. Everything so far has been individual dishes, but the last 10 are not really about dishes at all. They are about places. The specific kinds of rooms where America used to eat before the chains. The institutions that made these 1,000 regional meals possible. The Grand Hotel dining room, the department store tea room, the neighborhood soda fountain, the five and dime lunch counter, the all-night diner, the automat. These were the stages, and the dishes were the performances. When you kill the stage, every performance dies with it. You cannot have a hot brown without a hotel kitchen willing to make it, or a coddy without a drugstore fountain to sell it, or a French dip without a downtown counter serving the lunch crowd. The chains did not go dish by dish. They replaced the rooms, every one of them, with the same handful of buildings selling the same handful of foods. And every regional dish that lived in those rooms simply had nowhere left to exist. So as we count down the last 10, understand that we are eulogizing the places. Lose the room, and you lose everything that was ever cooked in it. Number 10, Chicago, Illinois, the Walnut Room at Marshall Fields. For most of the 20th century, the finest lunch in Chicago was served on the 7th floor of a department store. The Walnut Room at Marshall Fields, with its dark paneling and its towering Christmas tree, was where generations of Chicagoans dressed up to eat, where a mother took her daughter for a special day downtown, where the signature order was chicken pot pie under a golden crust, or the Mrs. Herring salad, and where the store's famous Frango mint chocolates finished the meal. This was the department store tea room, an institution that once existed in every great American city, an elegant restaurant inside the store, where shopping downtown meant a real sit-down lunch in a grand room, served by career waitresses who knew the regulars by name. The tea room was where America's downtowns held their sense of occasion. When the great department stores collapsed under the malls and then the internet, the tea rooms went with them, and an entire category of civic dining, dignified, affordable, tied to the ritual of a day downtown, simply ceased to exist. The Walnut Room barely survives as one of the last of its kind. The pot pie is still good, but the world of the department store tea room, where a city dressed up to have lunch together, is almost entirely gone. Number 9, Boston, Massachusetts, the Parker House. At the Parker House Hotel, opened in Boston in 1855, the kitchen invented two things America ate for a century. The first was the Parker House roll, a soft, buttery, folded dinner roll, tender and slightly sweet, that became the standard roll on every fancy table in the country. The second was Boston cream pie, which is not a pie at all, but a cake. 2 layers of sponge filled with custard and glazed with chocolate, created in that hotel kitchen, and eventually named the official dessert of Massachusetts. This is what the Grand American Hotel dining room did. It invented the dishes that then defined how the whole country ate special meals. The hotel dining room was the research kitchen of American cuisine, staffed by ambitious chefs cooking for a moneyed clientele, and its inventions trickled down to every table in the land. The Parker House itself operated for over a century and a half, one of the last grand hotel dining rooms in continuous operation. But the institution it represented, the hotel restaurant as a place of invention, ceremony, and career craftsmanship, has been hollowed out, replaced by hotels with a chain restaurant in the lobby serving the same food as the one across the street. The rolls and the cake survive as names. The The kitchen culture that created them is nearly extinct. Number 8. New Orleans, Louisiana. Bananas Foster. In 1951, at Brennan's restaurant in New Orleans, a chef needed a dessert built around bananas. The city was a major banana port and created pure theater. Bananas sautéed in butter, brown sugar and cinnamon, then splashed with rum and banana liqueur and set aflame right at your table. The fire leaping up while the sauce caramelized and the whole flaming spectacle spooned over vanilla ice cream. It was named for a regular customer, and it made Brennan's dining room glow with tableside flames every night. Bananas. Foster is the last great survivor of an entire lost art. Tableside cooking, the flambe cart, the captain and the garridon, the theater of a dish finished in front of you by a tuxedoed waiter with a burner and a flourish. Steak Diane, cherries Jubilee, Caesar salad tossed at the table, crepes Suzette set alight. An entire style of grand American restaurant service was built on the drama of finishing food before your eyes. That whole world of ceremony and skill vanished when dining became fast and casual and standardized, when nobody had the staff or the time or the room for a flaming cart. Bananas Foster still flames at Brennan's, one of the last places on earth where dessert is a performance. Almost everywhere else, the fire went out. Number 7. New York, New York. The Waldorf Salad. In the 1890s, the maitre d' of the brand new Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York tossed together apples, celery, and mayonnaise. Walnuts came later and created a salad so associated with luxury that it carried the hotel's name across the world. It was crisp and cool and simple, but it meant something. To eat a Waldorf salad was to touch the glamour of the grandest hotel in America, the place where high society dined and the modern luxury hotel was essentially invented. The Waldorf dining room set the standard for opulent American restaurant culture, and its dishes became shorthand for elegance from coast to coast. The salad went national, of course, which is exactly how it became a cliché, a scoop of apples and mayo on a leaf of lettuce, served without a shred of the ceremony or meaning it once carried. The original Waldorf Astoria closed and moved and closed again. Its legendary dining rooms shuttered. The salad survives as a punchline, a thing your grandmother made, its connection to the palace that created it forgotten. It is the story of this whole list in a single dish, an invention of a specific grand room, copied endlessly, drained of everything that made it matter, while the room that gave it meaning went dark forever. Number 6. New York, New York. Lobster Newburg at Delmonico's. Delmonico's, which opened in New York in the 1830s, was arguably the first real restaurant in America, the first place where you could sit at your own table, order from a menu, and be served fine food anytime you liked, rather than eating whatever the tavern was serving at a communal board. And its kitchen invented a stunning share of American classics. Lobster Newburg, lobster in a rich sauce of cream, butter, egg yolks, and sherry. Delmonico steak, baked Alaska, and eggs, Benedict, all traced to that legendary kitchen. Delmonico's essentially created the idea of the American fine dining restaurant, and then spent a century inventing the dishes that filled its menus. Lobster Newburg, decadent, sherried, impossibly rich, was the height of Gilded Age dining, the dish that announced you had arrived. The original Delmonico's finally closed after generations, and while the name has been revived, the unbroken kitchen tradition that invented American haute cuisine is gone. Lobster Newburg survives on a few old-line menus, but the restaurant that gave birth to the very concept of dining out in America, and to half the classic dishes we still recognize, could not outlast the century of change that turned eating out from an art into an industry. The first great American restaurant did not survive what American restaurants became. Number 5. Main Street America, the Blue Plate Special. This one never belonged to a single city because it belonged to all of them. In diners and lunchrooms from coast to coast, the Blue Plate Special was the deal of the day. A complete hot meal, a meat, 2 or 3 vegetables, and bread, served fast and cheap on a single plate, often a divided plate with the sections keeping the gravy from running into the peas. It cost $0.25 during the Depression and stayed cheap for decades. The dependable, dignified, affordable, hot lunch that fed working America every single day. You did not order a la carte. You got what the cook made that day, a real cooked meal for the price of pocket change, at a counter where the waitress called you honey and the regulars had their stools. The Blue Plate Special was the everyday miracle of American eating out, nutritious, filling, cheap, and made fresh, available to anyone in any town. The value meal killed it. The drive-through combo that offered speed and a low price while quietly replacing a plate of real cooked food with something reheated and wrapped in paper. The Blue Plate Special survives at the last independent diners, a dwindling few. But the idea that any working person in any town could sit down to a fresh, complete, cooked hot meal for pocket change is very nearly gone. Number 4. Atlanta, Georgia. The soda fountain. In 1886, at Jacob's Pharmacy in Atlanta, a new syrup was mixed with carbonated water and sold at the counter for a nickel, and Coca-Cola was born at a soda fountain because the soda fountain was the social heart of every American town. For most of a century, the drugstore fountain was where a community met. The marble counter, the spinning stools, the soda jerk in his paper hat pulling seltzer and building sundaes, egg creams, phosphates, malts, and banana splits, and serving grilled cheese and a cup of soup for lunch. It was where teenagers went on dates, where kids spent their allowance, where neighbors caught up over a cherry Coke made by hand with real syrup and a squirt of soda. The fountain was courtship and community and childhood, all at a counter inside the corner drugstore. Then the chain pharmacies took over, the ones with no counter, no jerk, no stools, no fountain at all, just aisles of product and a register. And the soda fountain vanished from American life almost completely. An institution that launched Coca-Cola and hosted a century of first dates and after-school afternoons was erased so thoroughly that most people under 50 have never sat at one. The drink Atlanta invented conquered the planet. The counter it was born at is gone. Number 3. New Orleans, Louisiana. The Po' Boy. In 1929, during a brutal streetcar strike in New Orleans, 2 brothers who ran a restaurant and who had once been streetcar men themselves promised to feed the striking workers for free for as long as the strike lasted. Whenever one of the hungry strikers came to the back door, the cooks would call out, "Here comes another poor boy," and hand over a sandwich, cheap cuts and gravy, or fried potatoes, or whatever they could stretch, piled onto long loaves of New Orleans French bread. The strike lasted months. The brothers kept their promise, feeding poor boys the whole time, and the sandwich took the name of the men it was made to feed. That is where the Po' Boy comes from, an act of solidarity, a sandwich invented to keep strikers fed for free, named in their honor. It grew into the Great Sandwich of New Orleans, dressed with lettuce, tomato, pickle, and mayo, filled with fried shrimp or oysters, or roast beef swimming in gravy, sold cheap on every corner. The Po' Boy survives, thank God, at the city's remaining neighborhood shops. But the fresh local French bread, the family-run corner sandwich shops, the whole ecosystem that made it, is under the same pressure as everything else on this list. Remember, always, that it began as men feeding hungry men for nothing, and named the food after the poor. Number 2. Greensboro, North Carolina. The Woolworth's lunch counter. Every 5 and dime store in America had a lunch counter, and for half a century it was where the whole country ate its everyday lunch. A long counter with swiveling stools running down one side of the Woolworths or the Kresge's, serving grilled cheese, egg salad, chicken a la king, banana splits, and coffee for pocket change while you shopped. It was cheap, it was everywhere, and it was woven into daily American life so completely that people forgot it was ever remarkable. But the lunch counter carries a weight heavier than nostalgia, because on February 1st, 1960, 4 black college students sat down at the Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, where they would be served standing but not sitting, and refused to leave. The sit-in movement that spread from that counter helped break segregation across the South. The lunch counter was not just where America ate, it was where America fought over who was allowed to sit down and eat at all. And then the 5 and dimes died, killed by the discount chains and the malls, and the lunch counters were ripped out one by one. The one in Greensboro was saved and turned into a museum, which is exactly the point. The American lunch counter is now something you visit behind glass, not something you sit down at. An institution that fed the country and helped change it is a historical exhibit. Number 1. New York and Philadelphia. The automat. There has never been anything else like it, and there never will be again. Starting in Philadelphia in 1902 and conquering New York, the automat was a restaurant with no waiters, and at the front of the house, no visible cooks. Just a gleaming wall of little glass-doored compartments, hundreds of them, each holding a fresh dish, a slice of pie, a bowl of baked beans, a sandwich, a plate of macaroni and cheese, a cup of coffee poured from a brass dolphin head spout. You put your nickels in the slot, turned the knob, the little glass door opened, and you took your food. Behind that wall, real cooks made everything fresh all day, restocking the compartments from the back. The automat was a genuine marvel, gorgeous, gleaming, futuristic, and it was radically democratic. For a handful of nickels, anyone could eat. The banker and the beggar, the office girl and the out-of-work man, all under the same Art Deco ceiling, all choosing from the same glass wall. No one judged, no one turned away. No one too poor to sit down with dignity. During the Depression, it fed the desperate a bowl of something hot for pennies. It was, for decades, the beloved beating heart of how a great city ate, and then fast food killed it. The burger chains offered the same speed with none of the beauty, none of the fresh cooking, none of the democracy. And one by one, the automats closed until the very last one in New York shut its doors in 1991, and the great gleaming walls of little glass doors were torn out and sold for scrap. The automat is the perfect symbol to end on because it was everything the chains promised: fast, cheap, convenient food for the masses. Except it was also beautiful, also fresh, also dignified, also a genuine public good. The chains kept the fast and the cheap and threw away the beauty and the dignity and called it an improvement. It was not. We had something better, and we let it be torn out of the wall. That is the whole story right there in the last one. Here is my challenge to you. Find one of these still being made, a real French dip, a fish fry, a coddy, a bowl of she-crab soup, a po' boy from a corner shop, and go eat it before it is gone at the family place that still makes it, and hand your money to the people keeping it alive. Then tell me in the comments which lost meal your city had, the one your grandparents talked about, the one that vanished when the chains came. Because these were never just meals. They were the proof that every American city used to taste like somewhere, and somewhere is worth remembering.